The Cold War was full of turbulent moments that either side thought could go hot at a moment's notice. If you were in charge of any country that could have been caught in the crossfire of this nuclear wiener measuring contest, you'd be foolish not to prepare for the worst. Nations like Albania built thousands of bunkers for its population. Many others stored food and seeds. But what about the nations that didn't expect nuclear fire, but Soviet boots and tanks? Well, these were the nations that built NATO's secret army with the help of the CIA and MI6. And potentially, that secret army was actually used. Hi, I'm Crate13. A blind Turkish woman once gave me a very important prophecy for which since I have forgotten. Today we're talking about Operation Gladio, the CIA and NATO's plan for secret stay-behind armies to wage a guerrilla war against invading Soviet forces, and how these stay-behind forces may have actually saw action, despite no war occurring. But first, we gotta rewind this puppy back to 1945 like we have to for most of my videos, it seems. Europe was more like Eurubble. The Second World War was devastating beyond belief, basically leaving everything but Switzerland destroyed. Pre-World War II, the threat of communism had been successfully halted at the border of Poland. However, after 1945, the Soviets marched across Eastern Europe and set up puppet governments in every nation east of Austria. It's funny when you think about it. The Western powers launched the Second World War in defense of Poland's sovereignty, but then let Stalin march in and de facto control Poland for the next 60 years. Funny. Anyways, sure, by the 1950s, the Soviets had nukes, but no one at this point seriously thought that nuclear warfare meant the end of all life on Earth. They just thought it was a change in warfare. And with tensions rising, a third world war between East and West seemed like an inevitability. Soviet military doctrine at this time was simple. Glass everything between Germany and the Rhine and blitz as many troops as humanly possible to overwhelm Western forces in 1 week. It was literally called 7 days to the River Rhine in Soviet planning. Now, would this have worked? Probably not, but for certain it would have been catastrophic and an obscene loss of human life. And the Soviets would have made gains, as they had the numbers. So NATO reached out to the CIA and voiced their concerns and asked for some advice. And the CIA felt like this was right up their alley. So they got to work across continental Europe, and they made sure that they were going to make it hell for the Soviets if they ever occupied Western Europe. So the CIA hit up their boys in the UK and asked them what their plan was if Operation Sea Lion had actually ever occurred. With the Germans invading Britain, and make Churchill stand on that whole "we'll fight on the beaches and the streets" line. So the guys who planned for that in Great Britain partnered with people that worked in the French resistance against the Germans and came up with a giant paramilitary network across Europe that was kind of akin to the United States version of Minutemen from colonial times.
Another settlement has sent word that they need our help.
In 1953, NATO officially made a charter for stay-behind organizations, SBOs, to be a part of their military and budget. At first, it was just the UK, France, and the Benelux countries working independently from one another, until NATO made it a point to make sure that these groups could properly communicate each other with proper communication equipment. So they began recruiting, and basically it was anyone who could 1. Fight, and 2. Hated communists. And in the early 1950s, there was a lot of young men who fit that description, if you catch my meaning. And so these men, some of which with very questionable pasts, got together. And with funding and supplies from the CIA, they stashed weapons, explosives, radios, anything a good guerrilla fighter would need, all across Europe. And in their meantime, they would train with these weapons and systems and be taught how to target occupation leaders and destroy supply lines. This was an organized paramilitary militia set up all across Europe, full of individuals with very strong beliefs and access to some very high-powered equipment. But it didn't matter because all this gear just sat in boxes for the next 50 years, right? You see, throughout the 1960s and 70s, it wasn't just sunshine and rainbows. There was a lot of political tension, not just in the United States, but in Europe as well. But especially in Italy. You see, in Italy, communist parties were gaining support amongst the people, and other Western governments, rightfully so, were not excited about this. But then, at one point when the Christian Democrats and the communists were going to come together and probably form a coalition government, one of Italy's former prime ministers from the Conservative Party was kidnapped and murdered by members of the Communist Party, and everything fell apart. There's also a bunch of other bombings that were sprinkled in there for good measure in what would become known as the Years of Lead in Italy. Which that sounds like that would have been a great rap album name for an East Atlanta rapper in 2013. Well, Swiss author Daniel Ganser took this event, as well as others in Belgium and other parts of Europe, and made a claim in his 2000 book, NATO's Secret Army, that these attacks weren't just leftist extremism, but but CIA false flag attacks designed to pull European governments and populations back to the right. Which, hey, I'm not gonna lie, that actually sounds like something the CIA would love to do. Just ask Chile, Nicaragua, Argentina,
2 hours later,
Romania, and Peru. Ganser pulled the majority of his research from the U.S. Army Field Manual 3031B and used it as his primary source for his claims that the CIA was involved in the deaths of hundreds of innocent civilians. Which would be great if the field manual was real, and also not a Soviet forgery made with the intention of sowing distrust amongst Western nations. Also in the book, Ganser is extremely critical of the West as a whole, but super supportive of the Soviets and Russia, and doesn't criticize them at all. In all reality, this book was the communist sympathizer's attempt at making excuses for his own side's crimes. Because, communists are famously peaceful and wouldn't commit horrid atrocities. Just ask the Romanovs. Or people that wore glasses in Cambodia. No, seriously though, I get the United States is not sin-free in history. We've done some messed up stuff on the global stage. I'll admit it. But communists still take the cake when it comes to political wrath. Which is why those SBOs were formed in the first place. Because it doesn't just end with a breadline. It ends with anyone with the means and will to have personal autonomy being forced to face a wall. So stay behind organizations, get a positive review in the Crate 13 book. A very rare CIA moral win. Again, I want to say it's not impossible. Some of these groups that were trained as paramilitary stay-behind organizations had alternative goals to be used later by the CIA, but there's no proof of that. Most of these weapon caches have been found and destroyed by European governments at this point, and they look back at this history with shame for some reason. Which, maybe this is my America showing, but I don't get why. This is a group of countrymen coming together to not only defend themselves, but every man, woman, and child in that nation from being trampled over and oppressed by a foreign invader with Marxist ideology. I guess in 2026 they don't want Europeans to have that mindset anymore. And sadly, it looks like they've succeeded. Well guys, I'm gonna just assume this video is suppressed in the algorithm like my last 5 videos were. Please take a moment to like, hype it, comment, maybe even subscribe. And if you're already subscribed and you're ready to take your relationship with Crate 13 to the next level, join the channel. You get access to the Discord, we have a great time in there, and you get your name featured right here with all these other beautiful people. But other than that, guys, I hope you enjoyed whatever food you decided to eat or whatever poop you decided to poop when you sat down to watch this video. I'm Crate 13, and I hope you have a blessed day. Bye, guys.